Welcome back everyone to the Week in Black and White, a roundup of all the Juventus news that matters. This week I'm covering Saturday the 19th of January to Saturday the 26th of January. So we kick off Saturday with some transfer news. You're probably sick and tired of hearing about transfer news, but I promise we're nearly at the end of the January transfer window, so things are going to die down, I promise. This was actually quite an interesting story because it was reported from Di Marzio in Italy, and he's obviously quite reliable and has always been quite close to the mark when it comes to Juventus type of news. He reported that Juventus are going to meet Lyon to discuss, and I apologise for the pronunciation here because it's not going to be good, but I believe it's pronounced Ndombele. He is a French midfielder, obviously very promising, especially if Juventus are going to be linked with him. He's already had comparisons to players like Conte, like Michael Essien, like Patrick Vieira. He looks like the kind of midfielder I think, and I'm definitely not an expert on French football and I've not watched enough of him to sort of really weigh in with too heavy an opinion, but he looks like the kind of midfielder that Juventus really sort of need, almost like similar to Vidal in some ways, kind of a sort of a box-to-box midfielder that can also steal possession, that can also build attacks, that can also get back and sort of help defend. He looks like the kind of midfielder that could be quite complete in some ways. Interesting news. I think it's just one to follow for the moment. Don't know whether or not there's going to be a lot of competition for him. You would hope that if Juve are interested, it's the kind of deal that you could secure, that you could hope that Juve would secure well before the summer and sort of get an agreement in place with Lyon. Yeah, for the moment, just watch this space and see how it develops. Heading into Sunday, we had yet another transfer story. This one really seems to be the gift that just keeps on giving because it never ever goes away. It pops up every single transfer window, and I think it will continue to pop up until he eventually moves to Juventus. This was a story in Gazzetta who linked Matteo Darmian with a move to Juventus. The logic behind it, or the sort of story behind it, seemed to go that Juventus wanted to allow Spinazzola to have more minutes, playing more consistently, really giving him a chance to properly get over the injury that he had that saw him out for, goodness, it was almost 6 months. In order to do that, get consistency, go and play at Bologna, and Juventus bring in a sort of a third choice, or fourth choice rather, fullback in the shape of Darmian. Since then, it's kind of gone quiet. It doesn't really seem to have gone beyond that. I think it was possibly just a sort of an idea initially, just sounding out the possibility of bringing him in. No further reports since then, but having said that, we've still got, I think, at least a few more days left in the transfer window. So watch this space. Monday evening we played the first game of the second part of the season, so we're starting to enter the sort of the business end of the campaign. It was quite a straightforward victory. It was 3-0 against Chievo. I think there is always that tendency sometimes for people to say that, you know, it's against a really lowly opposition. Juve should be winning these games. They should be comfortable. I think when you sort of look at the way that we've played, perhaps in previous games where we've made it quite difficult, this was quite an encouraging performance. Yes, it was at home. Yes, it's against a team that's at the bottom of the table and have recently sold one of their most important players, but still, it was nice just to see the formation change, using what looked on paper like a 4-4-2, but I don't think it really was in terms of the actual way that we played. But it was really encouraging because a lot of players that don't normally shine really sort of stepped up to make a difference in this game. So you had players like Emre Can, who was really strong in midfield. He helped control things. He was a bit of a brute. He got stuck in the tackles. He scored a goal. I think his entire performance was really important to the game and the way that Juve played. Dybala was quite fantastic, playing that more sort of creative role where he was dropping between the lines and sort of linking up the play. He was more of a creative force in this game, and it's starting to sort of feel like maybe he is picking up that role and he's playing that role better, not necessarily because, again, I don't think he's naturally sort of inclined to do that. I think he's learning that role more so than it coming naturally to him. But yeah, it was a really encouraging sort of performance. Douglas Costa scored, which was really important again to see him back on the score sheet and playing with confidence and playing with a little bit of freedom as well. Daniele Rugani at the back scored as well. He was pretty fantastic, I think, overall. I loved the way that he was playing the ball out from the back. He looked quite confident, quite composed. He never really looks too flustered at the back. Again, I think it's going to take time for him to really sort of be the kind of leader that we need to take over from Chiellini and Bonucci. But games like this, it's really encouraging just to see him get those minutes, to see him have a strong, positive performance, and just to build up his own confidence as well. Yeah, so overall, quite a strong performance. An interesting sort of thing in the sense that you could possibly look at maybe Juve playing differently. This has happened in the past in seasons where we've played a certain way up to a certain point, and then Max has changed things, and then it's all sort of clicked into place, and Juve started playing much better. So I'm not saying we're definitely going to change from that conventional 4-3-3 that he likes to use, but this possibly gives some food for thought. Probably the most important thing to come out of the post-game press conference with Max Allegri was that he said Spinazzola is a Juventus player and that he will remain at the club, which kind of feels like, it's like a nice sigh of relief. I think as much as there are benefits to him going out on loan for 6 months and playing at a different club consistently, being in the first choice 11, I think there's probably more benefits to him staying at Juventus. He showed in that game against Bologna just what he can bring. I think he was probably the best player on the pitch, and this is obviously after he's coming back from quite a serious injury. It's going to take time. You can't sort of big him up too much. You can't say that he's going to make a massive difference because it's still too early. But when he does start to play more consistently, I think he's the kind of player that has fought to come back to Juve after 2 seasons on loan at Atalanta. He's proven what he can do there. He wants to prove it at Juve. He didn't want to leave during this transfer window. So for me, I think it's really important to keep him around, especially in this season, which could end up being a defining one. An interesting story on Tuesday where Sky Sport UK and Sky Sport Italia both linked Arsenal with the Sampdoria goalkeeper Emilio Audero. He's obviously on loan there at the moment from Juventus. They have an option to buy him at the end of the season, but Juve do have an option to then buy him back. Kind of an interesting but complicated sort of move, because there would be potentially 3 clubs involved if Arsenal were interested and wanted to make a bid. Still nothing concrete. I think the sort of suggestion was, the speculation rather, was that they want to buy him as someone that they could then groom to be a long-term replacement for someone like Pjaca. Again, you don't really know what to make of these kinds of stories at the early stage. In terms of how he's played, I think Audero has been quite promising, really. We saw that when we went and played Samp only a couple of weeks back. So again, like so many of these transfer stories, all you can do is just sit, watch and wait and see how it develops. Wednesday ended up being sort of a D-Day, really, in terms of transfers, especially when it's Juve related. First things first, Stefano Sturaro made his move back to Genoa. Initially, it's on loan for 1.5 million euros. That could then become a permanent move if he makes a certain amount of appearances, scores certain goals. I'm not entirely sure what the performance-related details are of him becoming permanent. I think it seems like he probably will end up going back there permanently. That will be for a further 8 million, which is going to be spread over 3 years. There could be up to 8.5 million in bonuses if he continues to perform in a certain way, which just seems ridiculous, really, to be honest. 8.5 million seems so high, but at the very least we'll be more or less making back, I think, what we paid for him initially. Then we had the big one, of course, Higuain moving to Chelsea, initially on loan, basically until the end of the season, so it's going to be 6 months. It's going to cost Chelsea 9 million euros altogether, and then they have an option to then extend the deal for another season, which I think is going to be for another 18 million, or they can buy him outright for 36 million euros. You can't really sort of knock it too much, to be honest. I don't think there is a huge market for him at the moment. I get the feeling he's going to be quite successful at Chelsea. I think his career is really going to get back on track. I get the feeling they probably will end up buying him outright, more than likely, which means that we make some money back on him. Obviously, it's nowhere close to what we spent, but you kind of have to take some of these hits, I think, sometimes, especially when you know that you're going to generate a degree of that money back, especially if you have a deep run in the Champions League this season. So financially, not the best deal for us, but just one to sort of, take on the chin and you just move on from it. On Thursday, there was a really brief interview with Ryan Giggs, kind of confirming the obvious thing that everyone already seems to know in terms of Aaron Ramsey moving to Juventus in the summer. But he sort of gave it his blessing as the current Wales manager, saying that you've seen the effect that it's had on Gareth Bale. Aaron Ramsey is going to a top-class football club, one of the best in the world. That will improve you as a player. When you're an international coach, all you want is your players to be playing, and he'll be playing at the highest level. So, nice bit of praise. Reports on Friday seem to suggest that Marco Pjaca is going to remain at Fiorentina despite having quite a sort of a strong approach made from Genoa. They were, by the sounds of it, really quite keen, making some promises about him being the future of their project. In the end, he turned it down. I think he wants to fight for his place at Fiorentina and try and make something of the remainder of this season. Kind of difficult to sort of figure out what's going to happen next with him, because I don't think he's played too consistently at Fiorentina. He's obviously coming back from an injury, so that factors in as well. Another Juventus player whose future is kind of up in the air. I don't think that Fiorentina are going to sign him outright at the end of the season. I think he probably will come back to Juve. From there, in the summer, more than likely he goes out on loan, or if perhaps a Premier League club is prepared to take a chance, we'll actually go ahead and sell him outright. Saturday, we more or less had the confirmation that Benatia is going to be leaving the club. Max Allegri talked about it in his pre-game conference. He explained that it's pretty much Benatia's decision. He's the guy that has decided to leave. He's the one that wants to move on. I think we sort of know the reasons why. The fact that he's sitting on the bench a lot, he's not getting to play. I don't think the salary increase is huge in terms of what he's going to be getting when he moves out to Qatar. You get the sense that this is more sort of about just moving away from the club because he's just not getting to play. It's going to be a nice change for him in terms of lifestyle. Do I think he's going to stay out there long term? Probably not. I think maybe he'll go out there for a year, realise that it's not really the standard that he requires, that he still has a lot to offer a club, and maybe he'll move on to the Premier League or back to the Bundesliga or something like that in the summer. We've already lined up a replacement for him, which is really positive. So Martin Caceres is coming back for his third stint at the club. Not the kind of move that, it's not groundbreaking. It's not going to be something that's going to massively change the way that the season goes. In terms of bringing him in, I think it's important to have that fifth choice centre-back. I think we've got the bonus in that, A, he knows the club inside and out, so he knows exactly what is going to be expected of him. B, he can play at full-back as well, so he brings that kind of cover. So if, push comes to shove, he can actually play, I think, probably on either flank. And C, he's had quite a good spell, or he had quite a good spell at Verona before he went to Lazio, and then I think he's again been on the bench more often than not at Lazio. So he's not someone that's going to come in, he's not going to demand to play, he's not going to, sort of unsettle the dressing room. He's someone that comes in, he's well known, I think he's pretty well respected, he's a familiar face. He just gives us that dependability. So if anything goes wrong, we have a fifth choice centre-back to rely on and a fifth choice full-back to rely on as well. So no complaints whatsoever. I think it's a good move for us. So on to the questions, and once again, huge response, loads of questions. A big thank you to everyone that is watching and sending in questions and engaging, because it makes it all worthwhile for me. It actually makes doing the videos worthwhile, so I really, really appreciate that. First question was from Tom, and he asked on YouTube, what are my thoughts about the Juve out hashtag? I don't know how to take this seriously. I mean, I think it was sort of tongue-in-cheek in terms of the way that they started it. I understand sort of, that it was to get attention, to try and, sort of bring up these kind of memories and these ideas of Juve always having help in games and blah, blah, blah. Honestly, I think if you look at just the standard of refereeing in Serie A, especially I think in the last 2 seasons in particular, it has been so poor. So when people start these hashtags and this kind of anti-Juve agenda, it's because they're so blinded to everything else that's taking place. They don't want to look at the poor decisions that are taking place in all the other games. It's just, anti-Juve agenda. I think it's just ridiculous. It's something to laugh at and really just mock and sort of deride and not really take too seriously. And another question from YouTube, this time from Entertainment Guruji, great username, asking what's my thoughts on Juve's playing style, which I covered already, but specifically, can we win the Champions League playing like this, and do we need a new midfielder in the January transfer window? Yes, we can win the Champions League. We have the components, we have all the right players. For me, it's a question of, does everything fall right for Juve? Do we start to get the best out of this group of players in the big games, the games that really matter? And I think this is very much on the players, and this is very much on Allegri, because I think you look around the competition in Europe, and I think there are teams out there that are very strong, they're very capable, but they're also capable of being beaten, and Juve are capable of being beaten as well, of course, but a lot of the traditional rivals are looking a little weak, and this really has to be the year that Juve capitalise. So yes, I think we can win the Champions League. Do we need a new midfielder? Ideally, yeah. I think it would have been good to bring in someone like Aaron Ramsey earlier, if we could have done. That said, we have the players in midfield for the moment, I think, to get us over the finish line, definitely. It would be nice to improve, definitely, but I think for the moment, we're fine. I think we'll have to go with what we've got. Great question from Finton, where he asks, given the recent positive performances, do you feel Allegri is vindicated in giving Dybala this new role? That's a really good question, because I think there have been improvements in the way that Dybala is playing. I think he's starting to get his head down, and he's starting to really sort of make more of a creative influence in the team. For me personally, I still think he is far better playing further up front. I don't like the way that he has to keep sort of drifting from one flank to the other, to keep trying to link up play, to keep trying to find the attacking players, when he should be the one playing in that role where he takes a touch or two and then he spins and he finishes, because he is really good at finishing. I mean, he was really showing that when he first joined Juve. But for me, yeah, I think Allegri is vindicated, because I think Dybala is starting to adapt to that role more. The real test is going to come when we travel to Madrid in a couple of weeks' time, and the games after there, because I think in the league we're absolutely fine. I don't think we're going to have too many problems if we win today. I'm recording on the day that we're going to play Lazio. If we win that game, we're 11 points clear. I think we can really put daylight between us and the sort of chasing pack. So in the league, I don't really think it's going to be too much of an issue. Dybala can use those games to kind of hone his sort of playing style and hone that sort of creative element of his game. In the Champions League is where it's really going to matter, and I think that we still have to wait to see how he's going to adapt and how he's going to play in those really, really big games. Brilliant question from Mike, as always. He asks, if I had to bring back an older fan favourite similar to what we're doing with Caceres, who would I pick? The picture kind of gives it away, really, to be honest. It would have to be one of Vidal or Pogba, I think. Probably more so Pogba, because he's younger, he's fitter, he's starting to sort of find his form, he's free of Mourinho. In that regard, I think he's now really starting to play his best football at United. I think he will probably continue to do that. Vidal, for me, is the kind of player I think maybe that was a bit more consistent at Juve, that really sort of got his head down and did the hard work and did the dirty work. So it would be between those two, but I think more so if I was going to take out the kind of personal preference and just say in terms of what the team needs, I think I would probably choose Pogba. Tough question from Grant, where he asks, how far do you think Juve will get in the Champions League? It has to be all the way, seriously. I think this is the first year that I really believe, probably even more so than when we went to Cardiff, that we're in the prime position to actually win the damn thing. It's just become this kind of monkey on Juve's back that we kind of have to get off. They're the best equipped team. I think we're strong in defence. We have probably among the best fullbacks in Europe that are really developing into fantastic players. Midfield is the only slight concern, but as we've seen, there are options and there's ways of tweaking it. We've got brilliant wingers that can deliver a lot if they're played in the right way, in the shape of Costa and Bernardeschi. We've got Cristiano Ronaldo, we've got Dybala, we've got Mandzukic. We have all the experience, we have all the players, we have one of the best coaches in the world. It's just a case of if everything comes together. So I think we can go all the way this season. It's just a question of, do we finally have the luck that's been missing? Do we get the players playing their best football? And can we have the sort of confidence and the psychology mentally to actually go all the way? And I think yes, I think this season we have it. An excellent question from Martin Ray asks, how does this current Juventus side compare to the pre-Calciopoli Juventus side? That is a really, really tough question, and I think it's also quite difficult to weigh those two teams, because in some ways there are quite a few parallels. I think in the way that people liked the fact that we started winning again under Capello after, I think there was only one season where we didn't win under Lippi, sort of in between. But Capello's football was a bit pragmatic. You could almost draw parallels to maybe the way that Allegri is playing at the moment. That said, I still think that this Juve side is better. I think it probably has more balance. I think it has perhaps some more creativity and probably a coach that's a little bit more flexible than Capello. I think so much of it comes down to the tactics. Capello famously left Del Piero on the bench for long periods of time. I don't think we had as much creativity in those Capello teams. We had a really robust sort of midfield, the traditional hard-working defence. Up front we had Ibrahimovic and Trezeguet, and yeah, it was good to watch at times. It wasn't the most attractive football. It was a functional team that kind of ground out the titles. But I think this time around, I think this Juve has those players that can make a difference. I think Dybala is going to come good by the end of the season. And of course, we have a guy who can make a difference in almost any circumstances when you have Cristiano Ronaldo on the team. So I think this current Juve team edges it. So Farouk asks, why wouldn't Arsenal take a little money to let Ramsey go in January rather than lose him for free in the summer? I think it's quite obvious when you look at how they played in the recent FA Cup game against United. You could see the difference that Ramsey makes in the midfield. They have other players that can do that, but I think it's just a logical thing for them where they want to keep the team intact. They want to try and push for top four. That financially is probably more important to them than perhaps making, I don't know, 11 million or 12 million for Ramsey in the January transfer window. Keeping a player like him who can make the difference, who can motivate the team, he's been there so long, he's well respected in the dressing room. I think it makes more sense for them to keep a player like him than cash in on him in a season that's quite transitional for them and where they really need to make the difference to try and get into the top four. Interesting question from Ronald where he asks, how do you think the De Jong transfer to Barcelona will affect the negotiations for De Ligt? Will it benefit Barca or Juve's chances? I'm really not too much of a transfer expert, to be honest. I think something like this, you could sort of read it either way, in the sense that Barcelona have spent a large amount of money in bringing in De Jong, and perhaps that could financially price them out of someone like De Ligt. At the same time, you could flip it and say, okay, well, there's always been this long-standing tradition and this sort of history between Barca and Ajax, and I think they've always had quite a good relationship. So having De Jong there could, perhaps encourage De Ligt to go there. It's difficult to say. I wouldn't want to say with any certainty or really sort of try and offer an opinion when I'm not too much of an expert on this kind of stuff. But I think it's literally just a coin toss. I think there's so many other teams that want him. I think so much of it will depend on the price, the player in terms of where he wants to go, who makes the biggest offer, all this kind of stuff. So totally in the air for me. Really good question from Baza, who asks, when Allegri leaves, would you prefer a similar manager with a pragmatic approach, because if it's not broke, don't fix it? Or would you prefer a more attacking-based manager to come in, rip things up, change everything because something fresh might reinvigorate the team? Personally, I think I'd rather have someone come in and change things up, and change the tactics and change the approach. Simply because, and that's not anything to do with Allegri or the success that he's brought to the club, I think there just needs to be a little change every now and again. There is a big part of me that wants Allegri to stay and, you know, be there for at least another sort of 2 or 3 seasons for us to get to 10 Serie A titles in a row and then maybe change things. At the same time, if we were to bring in a more attack-minded coach, I wouldn't be averse to it, definitely not. I think we're at this period now where we are so far ahead in terms of everything that we're doing at the club, not just on the pitch, that I think we can kick on, and if we can win a Champions League, we can just keep building on that and keep building on it and just keep reinvigorating the team, and the rest of Serie A will really have to dramatically change in order to catch up. So if we're doing that much off the pitch, I think that is going to feed into whoever comes in as the new coach. I think they will just continue and keep Allegri's legacy going. I think obviously so much of it will depend on what happens in the next few months, because obviously we always sort of laugh and joke about or poke fun at the idea that Allegri's teams always improve in sort of February, March, and that's when you're going to get the best out of them. For me, I think that's still the case. If that formula works, if that is something that is the case, then, you know, why not keep Allegri for another 2 or 3 seasons if we can win the Champions League and try and build on that and do something similar to what they've done at Madrid. If it doesn't work out, then I think there's no harm whatsoever, and I would probably prefer that someone new comes in the summer, tries a completely different approach and sees what they can do with this team. Obviously, the big news at the moment is Benatia leaving probably in the next couple of days. And Demir asks, what are my thoughts on Benatia leaving, and will it impact us negatively at the back? I think it will, really, to be honest. I think he's someone that he's always been reliable. I think he sometimes needs a little period of time to to find his feet when he's out of the team for a period. I think he's a guy that really relies on confidence as well. He's a confidence player. He wants to feel believed in. He wants to feel like what he's doing on the pitch is being matched by, you know, what the fans are giving him and what the manager and what the coach is giving him as well. I think that's probably the reason for him leaving. I think he feels like he gave a hell of a lot last season. He stepped in, and him then sort of taking that leading role and then being shunted back to the bench because Bonucci came back. You know, I don't think that would be nice in any walk of life. It doesn't matter what you're doing. So his experience, I think, is definitely going to be missed. We have to hope, really, that Chiellini and Bonucci are going to stay fit and that Rugani can step up if he's called on, because after that it's going to be Barzagli or Caceres. I still think Benatia is a fantastic defender. I don't really know why he's making the choice to go to the Middle East. I think, you know, perhaps partly money, perhaps to make a statement, lifestyle, I've no idea. I don't know what's going on in his head. In terms of how it's going to impact Juve, I think, yeah, it will have a negative impact should one of the front two or the first 2 centre-backs get injured. And finally, to finish off, 2 questions sort of combined in one. One was from Blaze, where he asks, after Benatia's exit, will Rugani finally become the player we've been hoping to see for years? And Hunter asks, is Caceres a good replacement for Benatia? Obviously, I sort of mentioned that in the news earlier. I think in terms of the hierarchy now, Rugani definitely jumps up one place. So he is now going to be the 3rd choice centre-back. So this is now his time. I think he needs to be playing more often. I think partly because of Bonucci's inconsistencies here and there. That's not a dig at him or anything like that. He has made mistakes. He's improved in recent weeks. I think he's done better, but I think there has to come a point when Rugani comes into the first 11 and he starts playing more consistently, and it has to happen sooner rather than later. Will he become the player that we all hoped he would? I think so, yeah. I think you can't expect a player to be consistent, to give consistently good performances if they're not out there making mistakes. They have to make the mistakes. They have to learn from them. They have to have the first team experience in the big games. They need to have that kind of environment, that kind of pressure in order to succeed. You can't play someone like Rugani in a game against, I don't know, Chievo every, couple of months or something like that, and then expect him to sort of kick on from that. He needs to make mistakes, just like Bonucci did. if you remember how Bonucci played when he first started at Juve, he wasn't great. He made a lot of mistakes, but he learned from it. He was coached by Conte and he got better and he had more confidence as he played in those big games and those important occasions. And then he came to thrive on it. And I think that's what Rugani needs. Even if he doesn't become that player, I think he needs, at the very least, the chances to play in those games so that we can then see whether or not he can or can't handle that kind of pressure. In terms of the second part of the question with regards to Caceres, again, as I mentioned before, I think he is the perfect replacement in the sense that he's not going to take time to adjust to the Juve environment. He knows exactly what's demanded of him. He knows what's expected. And most importantly, he's not going to be like Benatia, wanting to play all the time. He knows exactly what he's been signed for. He knows exactly what his role is in this team. So in that regard, yes, I think it's a good signing in terms of it will keep the dressing room happy, it will keep morale happy. You're not going to have a negative influence in terms of that one player sitting by himself, always frowning and always sort of feeling down. You want a harmonious dressing room in a season that could be pivotal. In terms of the quality, I think Benatia is probably a better defender than Caceres, but to be honest, I think it's kind of a trade-off, really, to be honest. So that's it for another week. Once again, a huge thank you to everyone that is subscribing, that's liking, that's sending in questions. It makes all the difference and is massively appreciated. If you have any questions for the next show, by all means, send them in. You can reply to the videos on YouTube, or you can send us a question on Twitter using the hashtag JuvefcTV. That's everything for this time round. Fino alla fine, Forza Juve.